Hey guys, welcome back to Live the Land. I hope everyone who celebrated had an incredible Passover and also listened to our awesome series, which is now over. Things have been kind of crazy. Now we are in this ceasefire with Iran. And honestly, that was just a wild war. I'm not sure what's going to happen. And it kind of feels like we're sitting here in Israel, like looking for what God's will has for this story and what the ending is going to be like. And honestly, it's fascinating. And I'm so happy that I know there will not be a rocket in the middle of this recording. But I wanted to talk today about the Tanach. Now, there's something that I'm sure none of us really think about when we read through the Tanakh. At least I don't. And I'm going to tell this to you and you'll be like, obviously, Franny. And even though you say that, you're not really thinking about it. It isn't obvious and we still don't think about it. We think about the stories, we think about the characters, and mostly, I hope, we read the Tanakh and we think, how is this relevant to my life? And because we do that, we tend to forget something that maybe seems minor, but is actually super important. And that is, what does their world actually look like? What was it? Because I think that our tendency is to read Tanakh and then kind of like imprint it on the lives that we live. We picture houses similar to the houses that we live in with windows and maybe gardens and living rooms and all the stuff. And like everyone has their bedroom, right? We picture cities and we think about our cities. We essentially take our structure, our comfort in our world, and we kind of copy paste it onto Tanakh, which is a problem because it's absolutely not that. That is not the world of the Tanakh. That is not the world of Abraham, of David, of anyone who lived here in Israel thousands of years ago. That wasn't their life. In fact, I'll actually just say that anyone who's ever been on a tour with me so many times, I go to big cities from the ancient worlds, like the city of David or like Gezer, and I'm like, this is a massive city. And people look at it and they're like, this is it? It's so small. And I have to like remind them, yeah, but remember, nowadays we all live in cities. Back then, majority of the population did not live in the city. So we're saying the city of Jerusalem, the people who lived within the walls of the city of Jerusalem were only people who, they worked in the government, they worked in trade, they were military. Most of the people were agricultural, and they would only come into the walls of the city if it was during war to protect themselves or if they were coming to sell their produce. That was it. Back in that time, they lived outside. They worked with their hands. They were farmers. They were shepherds. Most of their life was not in their homes. They measured their wealth in the weight of silver or how many donkeys or sheep or cattle you had, and not in numbers on a screen. Our world is so vastly different. And if you don't understand the world that they lived in, then you actually are missing a lot of the story of the Tanakh and what it has to tell us. They lived their life according to agricultural seasons. That was everything to them. When they would harvest, when they would plant, life was so vastly different. And that, my friends, is the story itself. And that brings me to our guest, Nachliel Selevan, the museum guy, the hipster settler. He is someone who is bringing that context back to the biblical stories. And he's doing it through archaeological finds, through actual remnants, things that you can hold and look at, through maps, through geography, through the storyline, but meeting it in a way that's totally different. He also happens to live like that himself. He lives in a small farming town on the edge of the desert in Judea. And I just think there's so much to learn from him. I'm going to say this is a packed episode. We're going to get into how we can see the stories differently through different eyes when we read them. We talk about homeschooling. We talk about farmers and shepherds, ancient Egypt, and now there's a lot to unpack. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you on the other side to get really deep and talk a little bit more about what it means for us today. Nachliel Selavan, welcome to Live the Land. I'm so glad that you're making time to come hang out on this podcast. You are the museum guy, but really,
that's what they say.
I mean, that's how I know you, the museum guy. And really, it's almost like you're here showing people a different way to see the world through ancient stuff. Can you, I don't know, tell us a little bit about how your way of helping people experience history?
Well, I'm primarily a Tanakh and history teacher, and so the main idea is context, is to look at the stories and try as much as possible to approximate an understanding of the context in which the stories happened. What did the land look like? Where was it happening? Who were the neighbors? What was it like to just live daily life? What did the world map look like for people at the time? And that way to try to take people back to that kind of place and then see what kind of questions come up and engage with the stories in a completely different level. So it's really all about context. As a history teacher, as a Tanakh teacher, and I do that through artifacts. I do that through maps. I do that through geography, even geology, geopolitics, ancient history, cultures, whatever I can do. That's just what I'm excited about. It started from Tanakh, but it branched out to other areas of Jewish and global history.
It's interesting because I feel like it's kind of true that we tend to, or maybe I'm speaking for myself, when I read the Tanakh or we learn history in general or walking around, it's hard to leave the context that we live in today and kind of like copy paste that on thousands of years ago. Like I was just recently walking around an ancient site and I was thinking like, during this time period, they probably didn't have windows. But in my brain, like we think about that, but they probably just had holes in their wall to let air in.
Basically, yeah. You visit an ancient Israelite house, the 4-room house, and you realize that everything was done outdoors except maybe eating and sleeping.
Yeah.
People lived outdoors.
We're much more homey now.
A lot more, especially the computers tied us into the house. Everybody's home, it used to be like, go out and play. Now it's like, whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do. As a mom, I totally do. So you actually, although you live now you are the hipster settler and you live in a really cool place, and we'll get to that in a bit. You were actually, raised partially in the old city, which is itself layers and layers of history. I'm there all the time.
Literally.
Yeah. It's where it all is. Did that shape the way that you see history, that you see Tanakh, that you see, like, how did that affect your vision of the world?
It's definitely a secondary cause, because the first part is really growing into in my family, where my father is a tour guide and an educator. And that had a very profound impact on me, even as a kid, just participating in archaeological digs, in just traveling the country. Like Pesach is coming up when we're recording this, and on Pesach my father would be guiding a big group. The family would just hop onto the bus and that would be our Pesach tour. So that was the first part. But then my father became a tour guide, having studied as a yeshiva student in the Jewish quarter. People would ask him for directions to the Kotel, and he would say the Kotel is that way, but did you know that there's also Hezekiah's wall, and so on. So it became his hobby, and then he ended up writing what's called Tzaddik's Guide to the Old City back in the 90s, when there was a deli called Tzaddik's Deli. So that was the first thing, is really the upbringing and the passion for education and Tanakh and history. That wouldn't have happened had it not been in the Old City. So that's the environment in which I grew up, and I love digging in the dirt and finding ancient things and hearing the tourists talk about this and about that and seeing the world coming to see Jerusalem. So those are the two parts, really.
Yeah. So as a tour guide mom, now I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, are my kids going to turn into you? Maybe.
Not if you raise them in the old city today. It's so touristy.
It's so different.
Now. It's so,
I know.
And it's so what's the word when there's so many shops?
Yeah.
Merchandise.
It's like, I know there is a word. Commercial. That's the word. Yes. Commercial. I remember when I lived there 20 years ago. It's totally different. All the Makolits are different. It's a different world.
Everything.
But you know what? That's also good, because we want tourists to come. We want all of our brothers and sisters and all of our listeners to come and hang out in the old city, but like also Judea and Samaria. We're going to get to that. So I want to ask you, you're a history guy, you're a Tanakh guy. Was there a moment in your life when your perspective on seeing these things as like stories that we learn about from your father, from school, where it turns into something more real?
So it's hard for me to point an exact aha moment, because I was sort of born into it. But once I started teaching, it sort of fell into place, and I realized that this isn't something usual. This is something special, unique, that not everybody understands intuitively. And I started finding ways to share that. So one moment was in my first year of teaching as a student in a school called Rappaport in Jerusalem. The eighth grade was learning Sefer Daniel. Why were they learning Daniel? I don't know. And
wow, that's pretty bold.
Their eighth grade Rebbe did not know what to do with it, and he sort of got stuck after the first chapter. And I said, let me do this out of my own pocket. I was still a student. I came and I would get a cab. I would come in on Tuesdays and teach that last class of the day. I just did it for fun. And the next year they offered me a job. And I brought this book. Do I have it here? Actually, I have it right here. It's called Babylon, Myth and Reality. It's from the British Museum. There was an exhibit in, I think it was 2008. And this book has cuneiform clay tablets with dream interpretations that kind of fits into the story of Daniel. It has the Ishtar gate, the lions and those glazed bricks. It's also on the cover. If you're only listening, then you should know that the Ishtar gate of Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon, those lions are in different museums around the world. The actual gate is currently in Berlin, and they're going to be renovating it for the next few years. So you won't be able to see it in the near future. And there's also the really amazing tablet that has the mention of Yehoiachin, the king of Judah, who surrendered and was brought in as a captive into Babylon, and the daily rations that he was given. So all of that is here, and I just used this to teach the class. And I'll just mention that years later, one of these students told me when he was in Mechina, before the army, he said everybody was learning Daniel and they panicked. What do we do with this book? And he just said, like, been there, done that. This is exciting. I love this. He wasn't afraid of the book of Daniel. So this was before I even dreamed of walking into museums, but that was the beginning. And another story was when I was already in the United States for almost 7 years. I was teaching at Netivot Montessori in East Brunswick, New Jersey, and we decided to do a field trip, go to New York and spend the day at the Met. Half a day art. I also have a background in art, and half a day Tanach. So that was my very first, this was 2015. That was my very first tour, and I was preparing that tour. I went to the Met a few times, and it took a while until everything clicked, but that was the beginning of the journey. Wow. And there was one story that I remember when I was preparing. They were learning Melachim. They were learning all about kings, Israel and Judah, the kings, all engaged with the Assyrian Empire, the Babylonian Empire, how the kingdoms of Judah and Israel made certain decisions for good and for bad, and what that led to. So I was studying all this. And then I saw a fragment of a relief from Nineveh, from Sennacherib's palace. I thought it was part of the Lachish reliefs that are in the British Museum, but I didn't even know what that was yet. This is very new to me. And I started reading about the story, and I knew what the story was, and I just remember seeing this fragment of people being kicked out of their city. I thought that was Lachish. Yeah. I remember falling on my knees in the museum and going, "Oh my God!
Oh my God, those are my ancestors!"
Like, wow. Wow. Yeah. So that was, I guess, those are two things that had a very pivotal role in this trajectory.
Yeah. Do you think what do you think changes? I hear that the way that you teach, it's so deeply connected to the artifacts, to seeing what was. What do you think? How do you think that changes the story? Besides, there's I'm a tour guide, so I obviously walk around. We walk around Judea and Samaria, and you see all these incredible sites. Yeah. And you see them. When you hold up an artifact, how does that actually change how you see the story? How does it affect it?
So there's really two parts. One of them really is what the tour guide goes out onto the actual site. When you're on the site, you can do excellent storytelling, but you're limited to what that site has to show. Yeah. When you're in the museum,
most of the artifacts aren't there. You're like, right, these are the rocks, but something was inside.
So today they simulate it. Yeah. They have a visit, like even in Lachish, they have a copy of the prism of Sennacherib's prism.
We have a lot of pictures that we show as tour guides.
So sometimes I will bring an artifact to a classroom. I have a few things, some coins, some this, some that, some pottery, but being in a museum setting in which an artifact is not in a vacuum, it's in a context. You can follow a story along a collection of artifacts from different sites and different cultures and different times, and you can weave together a story. That's the power of an artifact in a museum, where you can see a similar artifact or a similar development across time and space. So it's not just the artifact, it's the museum setting that empowers it. And so through those different things of the museum, I try to, again, like we said in the beginning, context, is to try to understand how was this artifact used. And sometimes I'll give my students or tourists, I'll give them clues, like what is it that we know about the world at the time? Where is it that you're living? What is it that you're dealing with? Like, for example, we'll talk about the Gezer calendar, which is the oldest Hebrew calendar in the world. It's about 2,900 years old.
From Gezer.
And it has...
Which is technically in Judea.
Which is
going to put that out
there.
It is. It's a very big Judean city.
It's a very important city. It goes back to the times of King Solomon. It was a gift from Paro. It's the whole thing. So the city of Gezer, they found there a calendar that is written in ancient Hebrew alphabet, but it's basically Hebrew, and it lists the months of the year based on agricultural activity, starting from the month of Tishrei, which in the Torah is the 7th month, but that's the agricultural cycle, right? And so to try to figure out what that meant to a people, like, why is this significant? Who cares? And then we go into farming, we go into the cycles of the year, we talk about what governed people's life and the cycle of nature and the Jewish holidays, how they connect to agriculture, and so on and so forth. So in the environment of the museum, you can show it's actually put right next to all the farming things. It has a plowshare, so all these things, you can tie them together and then bring out that artifact.
Is there like a moment or an example or an object or something that you show people that completely changes how one would understand Tanach and the biblical story?
Yeah, so there's a series of weights and pieces of silver that were found in different areas of the Judean hills, like in not Eshtemoa, yes, in Eshtemoa, like south of near Susia, where they found the largest treasure of a silver hoard in the country. It's several kilograms of silver.
Wow.
And you start talking about, there's so many things you can do with that. How you measure, how you weigh silver. Currency is silver. And then you talk about the Hebrew word for money in modern Hebrew is kesef, which is the same word for silver, because that was what you used for bartering. You would use silver. And then you have weights there from the time of King Hezekiah, 2,700 years old. And those weights, besides having Paleo Hebrew on them, and then the symbol for shekel is basically an abstract purse, a money bag, kind of like the modern Hebrew letter ayin. There's so many things you can do there. And then you talk about breaking up pieces of silver that are melted together. So you talk about betza, like breaking, and like that's the word for bribing somebody, giving them betza. There's so many things.
Wow.
The word shekel comes from scale and weight, and you just tie together so many different things with just showing them stones and pieces of silver.
Yeah, you can talk about
and the fact that
the
people
whole world of
store
development
that
of
bit by
commerce.
bit. Right, there's so many things. I have one tour that I call the third side of the coin, in homage to Yaakov Meshorer's book, The Third Side of the Coin, where we talk about the development of money and currency till like tracing the imagery on modern Israeli banknotes. A lot of them come from archaeology as well as coins.
I also always say you can tell a lot about a country based on what they put on their money. And we in Israel right now have dead poets and archaeological artifacts. So
we're a dead poet society.
Yeah, we're like the poetry and like song, and also we really love our archaeology, and most of our coins are either archaeological finds or replicas of ancient,
we have
sovereign
pictures of coins on coins.
Yeah, like
pictures of coins on coins.
Yes, it's awesome. So you live in a very cool place. Let's get to it. You are called the hipster settler. You live in a place called Pnei Kedem, and I'm sure that majority, I'd say 99% of the people listening to this podcast or watching are like, we could not put that on a map if you asked us to. Tell us a little bit, what is Pnei Kedem? How did you get there? And also, for those of you who are viewers and you just see the facade of Nachliel and his cool, look, he definitely sticks out of the hilltop Pnei Kedem. Tell us about that. How'd you get there? What do you love about it? What would our viewers see if they came?
Well, you would see the Dead Sea. And there's something people say about the desert, because we're on the frontier. We're basically, think of fingers that are reaching into the desert, and those fingers are hills. So you basically have hilltop to hilltop to hilltop. And you could see, let's say, Ma'ale Amos and what's it called? Ibea Nachal from here. But the
Which,
hike
by the way, I'm just
would
going to
take
say,
you 2
though,
hours.
those places also, our viewers, listeners are like, we don't know where that is. You're kind of in southern Judea to the eastern side, checking it out.
So some people know Efrat.
Yeah.
But Efrat's like bourgeoisie. They have soccer fields there. They have a baseball team. They have a bank. They have shopping malls with music festivals. Amazing place.
Yeah.
Efrat is already a city. East Gush Etzion, that's the side that people doesn't know about. That's where we are still living as farmers, as shepherds, as builders, as pioneers. This is where you get the sense of still being pioneers without having your Starbucks in Israel.
Yes.
So this is where you really feel that connection. And while we're on the hill, we're at one of the highest points in the country. Neve Daniel is higher, but you can actually see the Hermon on a clear day from Pnei Kedem. You can see the Dead Sea, and you're seeing the desert while being on the hill. And it's an amazing view. It's an amazing place also for growing mostly grapes and olives. There are some other things there, but this is one of the best places in the country for growing grapes and olives. And we have 8 vineyards around us, like Hebron Heights, Isaac's Ram. My neighbor, literally across from my office, he's the one who takes care of their grapes. Like, we have some really, really great stuff here. So Pnei Kedem, I actually got here because of my wife, honestly. My wife was living here. She was working way back as a graphic artist for Yehuda HaKohen, and who's Project Chazon. He has all kinds of interesting things. So she, as a graphic artist, she was commissioned to make some kind of brochure for Gabe Reese, who has a farm here, the sheep farm. He wanted to start a farm. So she said to him, on the day that happens, let me know. And she came here and she worked on the farm. She helped build the farm here. So when we were dating,
it's also
she
a
was
tourist
living
attraction,
on a
farm.
bus. Oh,
People
yeah.
come to that farm, and you guys should all put this in your pin it. Gabe Reese's farm in Pnei Kedem.
Kid, it's called Chavat Har Kanub. And but you just put Pnei Kedem and it's the farm. You just drive through the yeshuv and you get there. So the farm itself she was working there as a sheep doula, helping birth what's called lambing,
Wow.
and which is we think God has a sense of humor, because my last name Selavan means white sheep. And crazy stuff.
That's wild.
So so she was living on a bus on the farm, and when we got married on the farm. We set up a tent in the middle of nowhere, got married here.
Wow.
And that itself is a crazy story, because where we live, we're sort of surrounded by all kinds of Arab villages, and the relationship with them, there is one of respect, but you always have to be on your toes here. So we got married on a Friday morning on the eve of Ramadan. There's people who didn't come to our wedding because of the location. They were afraid. What is this place? Pnei Kedem, East Gush Etzion. It's the wild, wild East. What's going on?
Yeah.
My mother actually asked, will there be anybody there with a firearm just in case? Now, the excellent response, which I didn't have at the time, was there might be a couple of people who don't have a firearm.
Yeah.
So
I was going to say everybody.
You got to be crazy to attack us there. So that's the reality. So we live in this place we have farmers, we have shepherds, we have people who work in high tech, we have educators, we have a little bit of everything. There's people who live like you wouldn't know that they live in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, but still, because this is also a residential place, but we're surrounded by farms. We're surrounded by there's all kinds of hilltops that are little houses that are popping up like mushrooms after rain, as we say.
Yeah.
So that's this place. You're like in between. You're kind of living residential, but you're you're looking
kind of
at
in the
the
middle
desert.
of nowhere.
Yeah, kind of. So Pnei Kedem literally means facing east, which we are. We are facing east. We are looking towards the Dead Sea. On a clear day, you can see the lights from Jordan. It's a beautiful, stunning view here. And you get, it's high up in the hills. So it's really hot in the summer, really cold at night, crazy wind.
Yeah, we were talking about, it's interesting because you are on that brink, and I'm going to also plug, if anyone didn't hear the episode with Ari Abramowitz and the Our Goat Farm, it's kind of a similar terrain, but you are in this kind of in-between space where you have the farming aspect and you also have the shepherding aspect. And I think that's something that's so deep and like ancient. Do you feel that tension between like the shepherds, the farmers, the difference in that type of lifestyle, our history, Tanach, for sure, all the stuff that you teach about as well?
For sure. This place is puts you into this biblical mindset. Not necessarily that we are trying to, go back and away from technology. I would say today farmers and shepherds sort of blend because it's all about connecting to the land. So we have farmers. There's very few shepherds in Pnei Kedem. There's just Gabe and his team, but in the whole area of Gush Etzion, there are a lot. There's a lot of farms that are popping up. Sometimes just with a handful of sheep, because people understand that that sheep help you hold on to the land. And I just remember this story when my wife and I were dating. She was talking about how a particular year's sheep came out very, very thin because the mir'eh, and she used the Hebrew word for pasture, mir'eh, was there wasn't a lot of mir'eh because there wasn't a lot of rain. And then that was a boom, like aha moment for me. Like, this is like right out of Yaakov Avinu. Like, we're talking the
Jacob.
patriarchs.
Yeah.
Like Jacob, it's like, yeah, sheep and the rainfall and we're moving around and like, what's going on? Suddenly I realized like, wow, we're dealing with the same realities right here. And so that was an amazing moment for me, the whole connection to sheep. And then later on, I understood about the security that sheep offer. And you think back to the story of Abraham and Lot, whose shepherds were fighting with each other, and we understand that as having to do with an argument about inheriting the land. And you realize that's the reality. Like your sheep create a security perimeter, and shepherds understand that language. And I remember hearing that before the farm was built here, there's a security fence, which that itself is a discussion. Should we or should we not have a security fence? It sends a message of we don't really belong here. Like Bat Ayin doesn't have fences and nobody messes with them.
Yeah, there's
right?
I would say the settlements, like these towns, these Jewish towns, divided into the ones that are like, we don't want a fence because this is ours and we should not have to be afraid, and the ones that say, actually, we're going to keep a fence.
Right. And there are new neighborhoods that are being built right outside our fence deliberately for that reason.
Yeah.
But that being said, you'd have Bedouin shepherds who would just walk up to the fence and just stare at you in your living room, and there's nothing you could do about it.
Yeah.
And what are you going to do? Just like call the army every time? But once Gabe built the farm, that created a sort of like a perimeter in which this is where we graze our sheep. Wow. And then he moved out almost a mile further east. So now that you can't even walk to the farm anymore. Like it's a 40-minute walk to get there with a stroller. Yeah.
So it's really, it's almost like this idea of the shepherds, like we have an agreement, like where are you able to go? Where am I able to go? And the more that there are these farms kind of popping up also, because I think a lot of the farms that are those little random hilltop ones, they're shepherding, and it's changing the a little bit of the geopolitics in the region as well. It's definitely affecting
absolutely.
it.
And people living in the city often don't really understand that, right? Like in general, I mean, people living in the city is kind of a bubble, like where does our food come from? And here we actually know. Like speaking of farm, like I'm more of I like gardening. I like to have a garden. My wife took it to the extreme, but we do have a garden. We have a grapevine. We grow things outside our house, and we love the fact that our kids just play in the dirt and know where food comes from. Like pick some grapes, pick grapes. Like they know where food comes from. So we have an awareness of that here, but in addition to that, there's an awareness of what it takes to actually live in the land, and that's something that people in the city can comfortably argue against without really understanding what is happening in the field, literally.
For sure. Well, so it seems like you're kind of like, you have this world where you're in the museums and you're in the civilization world and,
hipster settler.
The hipster settler, but then you're also like on the farm, like gardening in your house and your kids are eating dirt. Do you feel like a tension there at all between those two worlds, or do they complement each other?
I think they complement each other very, very well. Look, I'm not working in high tech. I'm talking about ancient things in a museum.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I find myself needing both. I'm kind of an ambivert. My wife's an introvert. She just let me be here. I don't want to talk to anyone, but I like to be around people and to inspire and to be with students and to educate and then to go home and have my quiet. Yeah. So for me, it's a perfect combination, and we're with less than an hour away from the museum, door to door. So it's not like we're in the middle of nowhere. Like we're kind of off.
Yeah.
We're still close to civilization.
For sure. So I want to ask you, you also teach homeschooling. That's also something that's in your back pocket. I'm so curious as a mom, and I'm thinking like of people who are listening, either people who grew up in the classic classroom education or parents who are listening to this. You were now hearing from like the hipster settler. What is it that homeschooling does differently that the classical, I guess, frontal classroom education fails at, in your opinion?
I would preface by saying I wouldn't necessarily say fails at. I would say that there's certain things that work for different people. I am also a teacher. Like I actually teach in Neve Shmuel and Efrat once a week, even though what I do there is very freestyle. But I teach within the school. I think it's important to be in the trenches to understand what teachers are going through to be part of that story. So I'm there, but I have one foot there and one foot in homeschool education. I what I like about homeschool education is the freedom and flexibility to explore and be more curious and creative and to work at the child's pace. And also not to be limited to some sort of externally imposed curriculum. I think that that's a major reason why people homeschool. You're also free from all kinds of other negative influences that can come in through school, and like social media is sort of forced upon kids in most schools today. Like you can't escape it. Everybody has a smartphone, so your kid has to have one too. So in a homeschool environment, it's a lot more controlled. The classroom education has its advantages too. I mean, there's some superb teachers who have had amazing impacts, even though the world is changing and the styles in which we learn and the access to information is requires the classroom setting to change and to adapt and to move, and no establishment likes to change. And so there's a lot of pushback. We're like, for the past over a decade, we've been going through a paradigm shift. And that's very, very clear. Right. And it's still, we're still figuring it out. And suddenly AI came and it's just gone crazy.
Yeah. The world is rapidly changing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but that really means that we need good educators, and the school system itself has a lot of good in it. It also has a lot of difficulties, and we see that through wars and through COVID, school has had a very difficult time adapting, and homeschooling pretty much stayed the same. So because you're not. So it has its pros and cons, but I like the freedom and the flexibility, and it doesn't kill the curiosity by forcing exams and forcing 45-minute structures.
So I wanna get to the area that we're talking about. I want to backtrack a tiny bit. The area, can you tell us how the area that you're living in, I guess the decisions that happened during the Maccabee time period, Hanukkah time period, and how that is affecting us or still relevant today? Tell us about that.
Wow. Well, the Hanukkah story, the post-Hanukkah story is really a good one, because the technical name for Pnei Kedem and the nearby town called Meitzad is Asfar. And Asfar is mentioned in the book of Maccabees, in the first book of Maccabees, as the lowest point in the revolt against the Seleucid Greeks.
Like the most southern point?
The lowest point in the battle. I'll explain.
Okay.
Is after the victory in the Battle of Beit Tzur, which is also here in the Judean hills. It's a few kilometers away from Hebron. So Beit Tzur is the decisive battle, after which we came to the temple and purified it and lit the menorah. But after that battle, there were 4 more battles, and we lost control of the Temple Mount, and Judah the Maccabee was killed also in this area. And after he was killed, Bakchides, who's a Greek commander, goes and pursues all of the supporters of the Maccabees. And so we're at the lowest point. 2 of the Maccabee brothers are dead. Another one gets killed in an ambush, and like by the Nabateans. It's a disaster. There's basically 2 brothers. 2 brothers remain, and they're hiding out from Bakchides al Mei Be'er Asfar, by the pit of the well of Asfar. And this is where the 2 brothers, Shimon and Yonatan, get together, and they somehow pull themselves together, and out of nothing, they just come back with a vengeance.
Wow.
And it's a bloody uprising. Like after that, it's like something out of Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I was going to say, this would be a great movie.
Oh, yeah.
Like now they have the House
like
of
the Red
David. They
Wedding.
need like a whole Maccabees one.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's required. It's such an amazing story.
Yeah.
It's a difficult story. It's a bloody story, and it's what was necessary in order for us to be sitting here today having this conversation. So everybody talks about about they tried to kill us, we won, let's eat, but nobody knows this story that happened right here. And so the very terrain in which you can hide out played a pivotal role in many formative stories in our history, from King David to the Maccabees, the Great Revolt, the Bar Kokhba Revolt. The geography here, the topography, is these hills that are very cavernous, lots of caves. And so hiding out in caves was what helped us survive sometimes and plan how we're going to fight Emperor Hadrian, half the Roman army. I mean, it was a disaster, but a lot of it happened here. The place is full of caves wherever you look. So this place, first of all, just has that history. I think that's the most important. Yeah, it has that history. Today, it's more about the things we mentioned earlier, which is the pioneering, which is the farming, which is the agriculture. I think that plays a battle. It's a different kind of battlefield today. We're not hiding in caves anymore.
And it's also not necessarily one that's violent. It's more like my sheep here, your sheep not here. It's different.
Yeah, I mean, it can get violent. It can get violent, and that's a very touchy subject. Obviously, we're not supporting violence here, and there's a lot of talk about that today.
Settler violence.
So, right. That being said, in the world of the desert, where we are, sort of the border of the desert, people understand. I don't want to say tribalism in the negative sense, but the idea of being a tribe is is protecting your resources, is marking territory, is showing strength and knowing how to protect your own, and honor and respect. People understand these things. It's the law of the desert. Yeah. People understand respect and power, and sometimes to establish that kind of respect and power, you need to kick around a little bit. Yeah. That doesn't mean you have to get crazy violent, but sometimes, you just go and they say here, balabait ishtageh, the owner went crazy, like you break something here and there. Everybody's like, okay, fine. Now we understand. We have respect. Yeah. So ideally, you don't have to get there. And I'm not saying you should do the crazy stuff that's going on, but people go a little bit overboard. Obviously, we're not condoning that.
No, definitely not.
It's just very naturally part of living here. It's like if you don't understand that, they will eat you alive.
Yeah, you won't last. It's a tough terrain.
Like we're here, like this year it's now is Ramadan over already? Yeah, Ramadan is over. So Ramadan, it's pouring rain here, and you have people out there guarding the sheep, and you ask yourself, who's crazy enough to climb up a hill that's almost a kilometer above sea level in the cold to steal a sheep? And people will tell you, if you understand the Middle East, that's exactly when it will be done.
Yeah,
like that's a sheep can feed the whole family. Can feed the whole family.
Absolutely,
right? Yeah.
It's worth a lot.
Oh yeah.
So one more question before we get into the rapid fire. When you look at where you live now, do you feel like you are continuing the stories of Tanach, or are we starting something completely new? Like, are we a continuum? Because I feel like life has changed so much. And with you, when you're looking at all these ancient artifacts, you're looking at where we came from, you're looking at the perspective, the context, as you stated. Is there a continuum, or is this really just a whole new phase?
I think it's a continuum. When you live in this part of town, it's very clearly a continuum, but it's way beyond. We're not going back to living in those times. We're in a very similar environment, which requires a certain awareness, but we're definitely dealing with new things. I mean, what we do here has a more profound impact. We have a profound impact. I mean, our access to internet here. I mean, all the shepherds have internet, and they film stuff, and that changes what's happening, and you can influence people. You could show them what it's like in so many different ways. It's a very different country, but our connection to the biblical is palpable in this part of the world. Yes.
Wow.
In this part of the country, I shall say.
Okay. Wow. Let's get into some rapid fire questions.
Sure.
It just means you answer them as quick as you can. Let's see. For our listeners who are coming to this region of Eastern Gush Etzion, the Judean frontier, give me 3 spots or 3 things to do that they should not miss.
First of all, Herodian. It's an amazing man-made fortress where King Herod was buried.
Definitely.
It's being built up. Lower Herodium is also being built up, and there's also a nice trail from there to the Chariton Monastery and the Chariton Cave, which is also very nice. There's different levels. There's beginners and there's advanced, so I wouldn't miss that. You can also go to wineries. There's at least 2 wineries here. There's Hasela Winery, and there is Tekoa Winery. And that's just in East Gush Etzion. West Gush Etzion, I mean, there's the Gush Winery and so on. You can also go ATVing right here, right outside Pnei Kedem. Yossi Rabin, he does ATVing here. And
Awesome.
if you're really into hikes, I mean, there's a lot of hikes you can do here. There's a lot of jeeping hikes you can do here. We do a cross-desert hike every Tu B'Av under the full moon. We walk to the
middle
Dead
of
Sea.
August, usually.
It's the middle of August. It's a family event.
And you walk from your house to the Dead Sea.
From Pnei Kedem
Full moon.
through the farm, full moon. You don't need flashlights. We stop in Rujumanaka, an old Turkish police station on the way. We have barbecues. We had a Sheva Brachot for someone's wedding this year, and we end up at sunrise on top of Mitzukei Dargot, overlooking the Ein Gedi spring. It's amazing.
Okay, guys, so that's something you should put on your list. Like, I'm coming next time. That's awesome. Okay, ready? Museum or mountains?
Oh, I hate to choose.
You have to. It's the rule.
For me, museum.
Oh, okay. One object, artifact that gives you chills every time you see it.
Wow, it's a tough one. That's a tough one.
One,
I would say I'm a bit biased as a Kohen, as a priest, the Birkat Kohanim from Ketaf, the oldest biblical verse on a piece of silver.
The priestly blessing.
The priestly blessing, which was found right next to where I grew up. So
amazing. Shepherd or farmer?
Farmer.
One biblical pasuk, a passage that feels very relevant to today.
From the end of the book of Daniel, that's a book, the one that always spoke to me. I'll say it in Hebrew and I'll try to paraphrase it. והמשכילים יזהירו כזוהר הרקיע ומצדיקי הרבים ככוכבים לעולם ועד. This is so that basically, like, the knowledgeable people will glow like the brilliance of the heavens, and those who help justify, who help with the justice for the people, they will glow like the stars forever. And this is understood to refer to educators. So beautiful. I always thought this was a great verse.
Beautiful. Yeah. Okay, the most misunderstood part of Jewish history.
I would say the Second Temple period, which is it's such a complex time, from the Persians through the Greeks to the Romans, and all these things happening within different sects of Judaism that many of them became dead ends. But the Dead Sea Scrolls bring that out. Like, there's so much going on.
Okay,
that's not understood during that time.
Okay, if you could bring one biblical figure to hang out with you in a museum, who would you bring?
Wow, definitely Joseph.
Joseph. Yeah. Okay, you love Egypt.
He's the guy.
He's the guy.
Oh, but I love Joseph. He's my favorite character.
Okay.
Well, and Bilam, but he's the villain.
Well, you could take both. I'll let you take both. Bilam and Joseph. That'll be an interesting meetup.
Well, Joseph is the connector who seeks his brothers, who tries to understand people on their own terms, who dreams.
The dreamer.
I mean, he's a dreamer. I'm wearing stripes. Listen, the Technicolor coat.
Yeah.
And it's my middle name too.
Okay, so there you go. You could start with that. It'd be a nice icebreaker. You could also show him images from ancient Egypt.
And Bilam would be the critic. He would be the critic who can take anything positive about an artifact and turn it into something negative and spin it.
Yes.
So he's the guy. Yeah.
Okay. One moment in history that you wish you could witness.
Wow, it's a tough one. I'd like to say Sinai. I said that to my wife. She's like, but you were there.
I was going to say that. I was like, but you were there.
I was going to say, but if I would talk about biblical history, it would probably be either I would probably say Sinai, or I would like to see the first temple. I would like to see it. I would like to see Jerusalem
at its peak. The first temple's very fascinating because we don't really know 100%.
Jerusalem was surrounded by hills and trees. I mean, it was small. It was 3 little hilltops that were only connected in the time of the Maccabees. I mean, that's pretty new. That's news.
Did you see there's an AI video of Solomon's temple being built? Did you see that? It's been circulating. It's Solomon, and it has all these pastures. And I was like, it's cool to use AI for this, and most of this is wrong. But that's okay.
That's probably what I would say looking at it. They probably made the second
nice.
Herod's temple.
Yeah, but it's not right. It doesn't look like Herod's temple, but it's I wish. I agree with you.
There's a small window in our history in which things were good. You know, I would want to see what was that actually like.
Yeah.
I think we have it pretty good today. In terms of our lifestyle and comfort, We definitely have it
Mamash.
good today, but I would still be curious about that.
Well, on
What was
that
it
note,
like?
I will bless both of us and all of our listeners that in our time and in our day, we will see a world that is good, that is full of light. And I'm just going to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom and your unique quirk and your knowledge. And I'm also going to invite all of our listeners to come to Israel, to come visit Pnei Kedem, go see the farm, and then you can hop on a tour with Nachliel and any museum that you want.
I'm
And
waiting for them to reopen, please,
yes,
God,
I
soon.
know, I know, I know. Bezlat Hashem. Thank
Yeah,
you so much, Nachliel.
it's a pleasure.
Okay, so there's a line that I keep going back to in my mind when I think about my interview with Nachliel, and that was the idea of restoring context. And that's really what Nachliel does, whether it's through his educating or homeschooling, or if you ever were to see him in a museum, or even if you came to visit him on the farm. It's all about context. And I think that's a really important thing because there are these underlying hidden things that the Torah actually tells us that we really just can't understand. In fact, one of my favorite passages in the Torah comes from Dvarim, Deuteronomy 11, where Moshe is essentially telling the people, right? All of Deuteronomy is like how to a review what we have to take from the Torah. He talks about he's preparing them essentially for going into the land. And this is what he says in chapter 11, passage. For the land that you are about to go into and to inherit is not like the land of Egypt that you left behind, where you could sow your seed and irrigate by foot as in a vegetable garden. והארץ אשר אתם עוברים שם לרשתה, ארץ הרים ובקעות למטר השמיים תשתה מים. The land that you are crossing over and to inherit is a land of hills and valleys. It is watered by the sky's rains. And what is the most important part of it? ארץ אשר אדוני אלוהיך דורש אותה. It is a land where God watches over it. Tamid, always. The eyes of God are always upon it from the beginning of the year until the end. It's a totally different situation. Now, when you read this, you kind of just think it's like this abstract, beautiful idea, but really, when you understand the context, when you understand the difference in the civilization, in the cultures, in the land itself, then you notice that this isn't just a nice, beautiful idea. God doesn't watch over Egypt. He only watches over the land of Israel. It's describing an inherent difference between the cultures, the landscape of Egypt and Israel. Egypt has the Nile. Egypt is controlled. It's irrigated. It has systems. The situation is not one of dependency at all. Well, that's not true entirely. They are dependent on the Nile, but the Nile is a constant source of water. They didn't have to wait for rains during times of drought. They could take the water from the Nile and have gardens all along its banks to this day. If you look on Google Earth and you zoom in, you see all of the sides of the Nile that constantly overflow. They're used, they're irrigating. To this day, it's used. Israel is different. Israel is a land that you have to have rain, and you drive through the hilltops of Judea and Samaria, which is the high mountainous area, and you see the terraces that would utilize rainwater. You realize that there is of course gardens, but the main agriculture is, whether it's olives or grapes, just like Nachliel was saying, those require rain. That is just a fact. The shepherds, they require rain. That's it. We are dependent. In the end, this is a land that forces you to look up. And it's interesting because it reminds me of another story that's just popping up in my head, the story of Avraham and Lot's cattle that are fighting. And after that story, Avraham goes up, although also this happens most likely in the Judean Samaria hills, really the Samaria hills, on the third tallest mountain or fourth tallest mountain in the country, Baal Chatzor. They go up there, they're looking out, you can literally see the entire country from up there. And Abraham says to Lot, choose a place. Wherever you go left, I'll go right. And he chooses the area of Sodom, which is similar to that of Egypt because you have the Jordan River, you have the heat, you have natural springs. It's all water. It even makes that parallel. It's like Egypt that is flowing with water and vegetable gardens. Therefore, you don't have to work as hard. You don't have to look up. Whereas Abraham stays on the rocky, high, hilly terrain of the Judean Samaria hills, all the way down to Beersheba. And essentially, those are areas where your connection to God has to be constant. And I think that really seeing that the context of the land itself is really what makes that so powerful. And this duality of those different types of lifestyles, of the Egypt or Israel differences, that really does create two different types of people that honestly all societies are based on, in Israel for sure as well. And that is that of the farmer and that of the shepherd. And you really do see kind of like a play throughout Tanakh. I could probably do a whole episode just on these two different ideas. And we talked about it a little bit in the interview, but I want to go a little bit deeper in there. The farmer, the farmer is dependent on the land, but it's not just that. The farmer, of course, is also dependent on rain, especially in Israel, but it's a lot of work. I personally married into a family of farmers. Literally all of them are farmers, and all year round it is work, whether it's prepping the trees, tilling the trees, reaping, all the stuff that needs to happen that goes into it. And any of you who have ever, by the way, planted your own garden, you know how much effort it is and how exciting it is when you finally see the first fruit of your labor. You're like, these trees, finally I'm seeing some. Or, you plant cherry tomatoes and you work and it's cold. And finally the first ones start growing and you're so excited just to eat them. That's one type of person, connected to the land, settled in the land, working the land, breathing, sleeping, drinking the land. The style of life was constantly about those agricultural seasons, just like Nachliel talked about the Gezer tablet, which literally has all the months of the year, but they're all related. The names of the months are related to the agricultural seasons. This was their life. And building from that. That's one type of person. And then the other type is the shepherd. The shepherd is different. They're not connected to a specific plot of land. Rather, they're wandering where the rains take them, where their herd takes them, where there's fresh grass, where there's water, where there's space. It's a constant moving, it's a dependency that's way more spiritual. I think that it's not happenstance that most of the leaders of the people in the biblical story start out as shepherds. It's learning how to work between the godly necessity of rain and protection and grass, and also how to take into consideration every single one of my animals. It's living with uncertainty, essentially. And those two kind of battle it out. In one of the first stories in the Tanakh, you have the story of Cain and Hevel, Cain and Abel, right? You have Cain. Cain is a farmer. He's connected to the land. He's connected to that every single day toil of work, fruits, vegetables, planting, irrigating, pruning, all that stuff. And then you have Hevel. And it's interesting, by the way, the word Hevel itself means breath, or like something that it's like more detached. It's more uncertain. And Hevel is the shepherd. So he's kind of going, and there's this battle between them. And the problem with the farmer is that sometimes, because there's such intense dependency on your work with the land, is that we forget to look up. And that's what it says. Moshe actually warns the people before they go into the land. Also in Deuteronomy, he warns them, and he writes in Deuteronomy chapter 8, passage 17, you may, right, you could come to the place or you might be tempted to say to yourself, my power and the strength of my own hand have brought me this great wealth. This was mine. And that's why, by the way, the Torah says you actually have to bring those first fruits. They're not yours. They're to God. You have to bring them to the temple. And that's kind of maybe the idea. When you're a shepherd, you don't have that illusion that your work is what made everything happen. With a farmer, you can, because you're essentially doing the work. And then you could say, well, I did all this. But really, if you didn't have any rain, you didn't have the right soil or conditions, or there was too much sun, then everything doesn't work out. But you can maybe come to that idea because you do have to work really hard. A shepherd doesn't have that illusion. They're walking around and they know they're dependent on God. They know they're dependent on rain and whatever the rainy season will bring to their flock. If the rain doesn't come, there's no pasture, there's no life, and they're done. And it's kind of like how it is here. We live our daily lives. We sit and we learn Tanakh, and we can forget that this isn't just like a story that we're supposed to only connect to our lives, but to actually understand the depth of it, I have to put myself in the mindset and in the time period, in the world of the Tanakh. And that's really what Nachliel is doing. And it's interesting because he actually lives in a space. Pnei Kedem is one of those spaces where grazing, territory, rainfall, those aren't just concepts, agriculture, they're not just abstract concepts, but he's reading this story and going, yeah, this is real. The story of the battle of the shepherds between Abraham and Lot, that's still happening. It's happening now. And that kind of brings us to another thing that Nachliel said that I think is really important, especially for those of you who are planning, now that we're at a ceasefire, to buy tickets and hop over here and travel around Judea and Samaria. Obviously, definitely go check out Judean and Samaria Experience to hook you up with all the best vendors and spots. One of the more important things that I think is sometimes missing from these tours, and I'm a tour guide, right? Like we travel the land, we see the sights, we see the places, we open the scripture, we read from where the thing happened, and we see. And we're missing those smaller artifacts, the things that really bring them to life. So I'm going to actually invite you and say, even in Judea and Samaria, obviously you have the Israel Museum, you can actually blend historical museums that have artifacts in the places that they are. For example, you go to ancient Shiloh, there's a tiny little museum with artifacts there. You go to Hebron, Kiryat Arba, there's a really cool overlooked museum with artifacts there. Kedumim has a whole archaeological space there as well, which is the northern Samaria. Or you go to Alon Mored, there's an archaeological heritage center there as well. If we can blend these things, then suddenly you see the places, you see the land, you read the passages, and then you actually pick up the artifacts. You look at them, you say, wow, what was life actually like? The story becomes so much deeper. The world becomes painted in a different reality than the one that we're just living in, and we keep like copy pasting the Tanach onto. And honestly, those artifacts are what make things come to life, and we can understand things deeper. And it's also, I'm going back to Deuteronomy, like Moshe says right before the end of his life, right at the very end of the book, in chapter 32, passage 47, it says, Ki lo davarek hu mikem, ki hu chayechem. For these are not idle words for you, they are your very life. It's a whole world of life, and we understand when we actually meet people like Nachliel who bring it to life in a totally different way, that we are living it, we are continuing it. I'll see you guys next time. If this episode helped you better appreciate Judea and Samaria, you can take it to the next level with the Judea and Samaria experience. They can help you plan meaningful visits to this region, off the beaten sites, tour guides, connect you to local personalities, and guess what? This referral service is completely free thanks to our generous sponsors, Texans for a Safe Israel. Check them out at their website, JudeaSamariaExperience.com. That's Judea without an H, SamariaExperience.com. You won't regret it.